Professor Mohammed Yousaf, please make your presentation now.
Thank you so much. Let me share my slides. So slides are visible, I think.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, first of all, thank you so much for inviting to this great seminar webinar, because it is really really honor and to be a great honor to speak in the presence of Dr. Chris and Dr. Laigua. They contributed significantly on agenda setting. So let me say that I never personally met both Maxwell McComb and Donald Shaw. But when I was PhD student, I continuously was in touch with Dr. Maxwell McComb, and he very graciously guided me how to conduct my PhD research. And even after, when I completed my PhD dissertation, and I published one paper. The title of the paper was News Media Exposure and Community Consensus on Terrorism Issue in a Developing Country, first level and second level agenda setting effects. So he appreciated he appreciated a lot regarding the publication of that paper. And even he then guided me that I need to have one more paper on the compelling argument. And that was a couple of months before, but Dr. Maxwell McComb is no more between us. But I am working on that project, the compelling arguments regarding the terrorism issue. And we are extending that paper from first level, second level agenda setting to even third level of agenda setting. So Dr. Chris talk about Dr. Donald Shaw. I will spend most of my presentation on that topic, because building consensus in society is one of the most neglected segment of agenda setting theory. There are very few studies on that that domain or that tradition of agenda setting. But let me start from here, that what is the contribution of, or what is the legacy of agenda setting theory? Because agenda setting theory moved media effects paradigm from persuasion to journalistic perspective, because in 1940s, 50s, and even early 60s, the major topic in media studies was attitude change and behavior change. In other ways, the media was an independent variable, and attitude change or behavior change, in other words, voting behavior, was dependent variable. But Dr. Maxwell and Dr. Donald Shaw work introduced a new perspective in the form of agenda setting, and that was a journalistic perspective, which introduced us about learning more from the media rather than role of media in shaping attitudes and behavior change. And even if we look at Dr. Chris was talking about Donald Shaw, that he was like a grandfather to him. So if we talk about the grandfather of agenda setting, then Walter Lippmann was like a grandfather of agenda setting, because his seminal book, Public Opinion, one of the chapter was The Word Outside and the Pictures in Our Heads. That actually laid the foundation of agenda setting. And then Dr. Bernard Cohen's book, Press and Foreign Policy, which was published in 1963, that is one of the quote from agenda setting study, which became the part of almost all agenda setting studies, that press may not be successful much of the time in telling people what to think, but it is stunningly successful in telling its reader what to think about. And it follows from this that the world looks different to different people, depending not only on their personal interest, but also on the maps that are drawn for them by the writer, editors, and publishers of the papers they read, emphasis added. So that was the that was the beginning of agenda setting. These two books laid the foundation of agenda setting, which ultimately then resulted in the first study, which was published in 1972. And while Lang and Lang in 1991 writing about the contribution of agenda setting, he was of the opinion that the focus of research has turned away from persuasion towards change in the salience of certain objects on political landscape, away from the contents of public opinion, what people think of, towards the things about which the public has an opinion, what we call what people think about. So that was the contribution of agenda setting. That agenda setting introduce a journalistic perspective where people learn from more about the salience of issues or prominence of the issues rather than about the contents of the public opinion. Instead, the more focus was on the things or the objects about which the public should have an opinion about. And if we talk about the models of agenda setting, actually these were the models which were introduced in the first book-length study by Maxwell McComb and Donald Shaw. And on pages 1999 to 100, they gave the three models of agenda setting. One of them was the awareness model, and transfer that awareness to the public. That's why that model was labeled as awareness model. And then another model, which was salience model, made focused on that media makes certain issues salient, and then this salience is transferred to the public minds as well. In other words, the issues which are salient in the news media, with the passage of time, to a considerable degree, they become salient in the public's minds as well. And then the last model was the priority model, which focused that those issues which are given priority on the media, or slowly and gradually, they also become the priority of the public. So the issues which are very prominent or which media gives priority or prioritize them, ultimately at the end of the day, they also become they become the public priority as well. So public pays more attention to them. So then after this, I would like to focus on the aspect of agenda setting, which Dr. Chris was mentioning, and the pioneer paper, actually the first paper which was published, which gave rise to agenda setting theory in 1972. The last part of that paper talked about the sociological role of agenda setting. But most of agenda setting research has focused on the psychological, a few studies which are on the sociological role of agenda setting, or what we call consensus establishing role of agenda setting. The first study which was conducted, that was by Donald Shaw and Martin, which was published in Journalism and Mass Communication Quarterly in 1992. That was the first study, this one, which investigated that increased news media exposure brings diversified segments of society closer together. Or in other words, the conclusion of that paper was that news media act like magnets which bring diversified segments of the societies, in that case gender, age, income. These were the variables which they studied, and when they look at the news media exposure, and as the news media exposure increased, the frequency of news media exposure increased, the consensus among these different groups became less. There was more like consensus regarding the issues, because that studies was at the first level of agenda setting. So the more consensus was on the issues which were important in the society, because that study was conducted in USA. Then this study, which was conducted in 1995, followed by this 1992 study that was in Taiwan. And this study focused on television, and this was also at first level of agenda setting. And it also concluded that the increased news media frequency corresponds to consensus among different segments in the society. And in other words, the media act as magnets and bring people closer together, and creates harmony or consensus regarding the issues in society, which is very important for the functioning of any society in the world. And then this study that was in Spain, conducted by Dr. Maxwell Macomb with Spanish colleagues. This study was in a political context, and it was at both level, first level and second level agenda setting, which also supported the findings of these two studies at first level agenda setting effects regarding the consensus among different groups or the political groups in this context. And then this study was conducted in the European study, though this study used secondary data, but it also validated the results of the first three studies regarding the consensus about the terrorism issue, because it was conducted after the 9/11, and it talks about the attributes of different communities and attributes of the terrorism. And this study also concluded that increased news media exposure brings consensus in the society. And then this was a PhD dissertation in 2018, and then this was the latest paper in 2022, which I shared with Dr. Maxwell Macomb, and he really appreciated, because this was evidence from a developing country, because most of the agenda setting studies are in USA or Europe. So this was in the South Asia, especially Pakistan. So all these studies are focused on the sociological tradition of agenda setting, which is very important, because unless and until there is a consensus on the issues or the attributes of the issues, without them, the functioning of any society becomes difficult, if it is not impossible, because at least there need to be some sort of consensus regarding the issues or attributes. And even if Dr. Leikwa was talking about how to associate, because what to think about and how to think about, and then how to associate those nodes or those nets, is important development or tradition of agenda setting. And this tradition, what we call psychological addition or consensus building tradition, this needs more studies, because this is a very significant contribution of news media in our societies. And even in this age of misinformation and disinformation and polarization, the consensus function among the different segments in different societies, and even among different communities, different ethnicities, becomes very significant to facilitate the smooth functioning of societies, smooth functionings of or associated with each other, because gatekeeping is about the process of selection, and agenda setting is about the process of salience of the selected atoms. So once the gatekeeper, decides what items are to be selected, then the agenda setting role becomes important. That what of those selected items selected as a result of or or important, and those issues which are considered salient ultimately then become salient in the public minds, as well as I earlier talked. And then agenda setting and framing. Some scholars think that agenda setting, second level of agenda setting and framing are same. Some think them different, but in both ways, the how to think about the issues is a very important component of the public opinion formation, because at first level media focus, first level actually is the focus of attention, and then the second level is how people think about those issues, or how public interpret the issues, or in one way or in another way. And then cultivation, agenda setting and cultivation. And if we talk about the sociological role of agenda setting, this sociological paradigm or tradition of agenda setting brings agenda setting and cultivation analysis more closer, and they complement each other. Actually, they look like the cousins. So that is another contribution of agenda setting, that agenda setting is related with or complements other communication theories, so many other communication theories. And then agenda setting and spiral of silence is also a very important theories, which also correlate, or which also are associated, because when some agendas, what Dr. Chris Vargo was talking, agenda cutting, if some agendas are not presented, or they don't become the dominant agendas in media, ultimately they don't become a dominant agendas in the public, it means those discourses or those opinions or those narratives which are in minority actually become the, they become the victim of spiral of silence, or they go in the fear of rejection. And those agendas, either even they are based on misinformation or disinformation, which are dominant one in the media, ultimately at the end of the day they become dominant one. Agenda setting and status conferral, because status conferral was the first time used by Paul F. Lazarford. He used this concept that media confer status to certain celebrities or certain politicians or certain issues. Then agenda setting and of course status confer concept are also associated, or they also complement each other. So this is one of the greatest or great legacy of Dr. Maxwell McComb, Dr. Donald Shaw, and all other the great minds who contributed to agenda setting theory. That agenda setting theory not is a purely journalistic theory, but it also significantly correlates and complements so many other communication theories, communication concepts or hypotheses, which makes the understanding of society, understandings of the issues, understandings of public opinion, understanding of the voting behavior, and understanding and the functioning of the societies very easy for us. So that is all. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Professor Yousaf, for your presentation. We'll move quickly now to the last presentation from our Dr. Desmond Okocha, Dean, Faculty of Communications, Bingham University, who is collaborating with us on this seminar. Prof, please make your presentation so that we can take the remaining time to take questions for all of the presenters. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you. Let me just share my screen very quickly. I think Prof. Yousaf, you need to stop sharing your screen. Okay, thank you. Where is this? Okay, I think I'm going to change screen. Document. Okay, I think I'm having difficulty in sharing the screen, but let me proceed. My input to this conversation today goes around, number one, the legacy of Maxwell in the propagation and debating of the agenda setting theory. First of all, see that he was able to understand this environment because in 1922, Lippmann wrote his book on public opinion. And in that book, it sets the background for the intervention or debating of the agenda setting theory. And then Bernard Cohen in 1963 equally observed how certain conversations around the environment and politics within the media actually define and direct public conversation. And then in 1963, this theory was debated. Therefore, from that intervention, he's beckoning on the communication community, on scholars, not to operate in a vacuum, not to go into theorizing without having a deep understanding of their background. And that is one fundamental thing about the agenda setting theory. Secondly, within the African context, the agenda setting theory was baited when many African countries were getting their independence. That was in 1968. Nigeria got independent in 1960, Ghana in 1958, and some other countries. So this theory became a two-edged sword. In one hand, it was used by pre-independence leaders of African nations to project the need for independence, to project the need for self-rule, self-governance. And then post-independence, having seen the efficacy, because the origin of this theory was within the political environment, political communication. In spite of the fact that it was originated from the United States, yet it speaks volume about the African continent. So in one hand, the pre-independent leaders or the new independent leaders, right from Ghana, Nigeria, and other parts of Africa, saw the need to promote development, reconstruction, self-governance, constitutionalism, democracy as part of the agenda they were using the media to promote. Because if you look at the African nation, the early days from 1950s, 60s, 70s, even up to early 90s, majority of the media outlets were government-owned. So most of the government officials and agencies were using the media outlet vis-a-vis this theory to promote certain agenda, and they saw the efficacy of it. But post-independence, it became also a negative for many African countries, bringing the issue that Chris spoke about, which is the agenda cutting. And because most of the media outlets were being owned by the government, whether the television, radio, or newspaper, it became possible for political actors to equally remove from public domain certain news items, certain happenings that they do not want the public to know or discuss or talk about. So that is a foundation that we need to understand when we look at agenda setting within the African continent. Secondly, is the issue of agenda mending. To say that Africans or the audience of the media are not passive, and that is what the theory equally spoke about, but not in a very much depth. The audience of the media are very, very active, because a study has been done where we talk about the environmental dynamo, that within the African context, the audience cannot be looked at from homogeneous perspective, because a lot of factors determine how the audience relates with the media, depending on their location in Nigeria. For instance, Nigeria is divided into a kind of roughly two regions. We have the northern region and the southern region. And within this region, culture, religion, education, gender, history, they play a key role on how the individuals or the audience from these two regions relate and interact even with media agenda. Another point that this theory brought to the fore is about media ownership, which Professor Yousaf spoke about gatekeeping. Prior to the advent of the digital media, the social media, the owners of most of the prime media outlets in Africa, Nigeria in particular, and Ghana, were actually political actors. Because a study was done in the year 2015 in Ghana, where the major media outlets, in terms of the political affiliation of the owners, were studied. So if you look at Daily Guide, which is the largest private newspaper in Ghana, it is owned by the outgoing president of Ghana. And so if you look at the Inquiry and a host of others, so you now see how the government now uses these platforms in setting the agenda for discourse in those countries. And same also if you come to Nigeria, many of the media outlets also are owned by political actors. But again, when the digital era came, which was a beautiful one for the populace, the nationals, the citizens, but we understand that traditional media outlets depends solely or greatly on adverts. And the major source of adverts for media outlets in Africa are patronage from governments and big corporations. And if you understand the dynamics of the corporations in Africa, you'll understand that even the government is not immune or divorced from the corporations. Therefore, the news of media outlets within the continent, I do not intend to give the government that press agentry type of coverage. That armchair kind of coverage is denied access to the advert budget. Therefore, there becomes a problem. Another issue about agenda setting within the African context is the issue of fake news. Within the West, scholars, government officials have been able to define what fake news is. But in Africa, it's a bit difficult to redefine what fake news is, because in Nigeria in particular, fake news simply means whatever does not augur well for the ruling class. So once your reportage does not speak well of the government or political actors, it becomes a bit difficult. So these are issues about this agenda setting. But then this theory has set a basis to say again the issue of dominance of ideology, because agendas, news content within the African continent are not created in a vacuum. The news has a source. And the source of news, the source of information, the information flow within the African continent are not neutral. So this theory has awoken the consciousness of African scholars, African activists, African policymakers, decision makers, to go beyond analyzing the content of the information, the content of the news, the content of the agenda, to look at the motive and the source of the agenda. And that is important conversation that we need to have. Right now in Nigeria, an activist, cum lawyer, has written a book, and you see what is happening to him. He has been arrested and all that. And you see different narratives from different sources trying to explain whether he's right or he's in the wrong. They're giving a room for multiple agendas. But let's go beyond the agendas and do what we call beyond the veil, or removing the veil. Then you will understand that even the political actors sometimes deliberately try to control the agenda. And if the people do not understand the motive behind that, it becomes problematic. Having said that, what are some of the issues, because as a challenge or going forward for this theory in this era? Number one is that media audience now have plurality of media that is available to them. Unlike in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, where they had just state media and a few private media. It is possible to be in Nigeria and be exposed to CNN, to BBC, to Al Jazeera, to even media outlet in Pakistan, and then in UK and other parts of the world. Therefore, I want to put forward that now we're looking at agendas now. But then let's also remember the fact of the echo chambers. How does the echo chamber resist or create a blockage against agendas? Because in these echo chambers, there are power brokers, decision makers, gatekeepers within the system who ensure that any information or news that does not support, reinforce, or massage the existing information paradigm or stake is refuted. So in our study, as we move forward, we must look at, in Africa, there are lots of echo chambers. And many of these echo chambers are actually platforms that promote probably fake news or have certain ideological trends. So we must look at that. In Nigeria, we have the issue of Boko Haram, that is banditry and all that. And we see a double kind of narrative.
Dr. Desmond, please unmute. You're muted.
So the citizens of Nigeria want to know about the security situation in Nigeria, the economy of Nigeria, but how then do we balance agenda setting that is tinted, directed towards audience awareness, audience education, and audience information, and the issue of national security and sovereignty? So we want to talk about banditry, we want to talk about the falling naira, but our government feels also that is not a good agenda for us, and we'll see those counter issues. So that is another aspect we must look at. Then the issue of imperialism or neo-colonialism. In as much as we now have an array of media outlets available to us, and we are bombarded with different news and agenda from different parts of the world, how do we also filter that to balance all these transnational, transcultural agendas and maintain uniqueness, maintain our peculiarity as a people? So these are conversations. So what I'm doing more is raising conversations for us to debate that we might not have the answer in the immediate. But then one of the sub-themes in this conversation is how we can apply the agenda setting to bring about social change. And then let's get back to the SDGs. So it's important for us as communication scholars in our research endeavors, as newsmen and women, to be deliberate, especially applying what we call the peace journalism model. If we're looking at conflict zones, we can set our agenda in that direction. And then picking up solution journalism also, that in this issue of climate change, because in Nigeria, for instance, those communities in Kogi State, in Benue State, Nasarawa State, in the Niger Delta, they're having climate change related issues related to oil spillage, deforestation, and a host of others. So it's important for us also as communication scholars, knowing fully well that we have the ability to set a measure of agenda for public discourse, to look at those pressing issues, and then the issue of science communication, because there's a disconnect between the average scholar in Africa, in academia, in terms of his research output, and then the reportage, because sometimes the jargon that we speak, the high factor languages we speak, the newsmen and women are unable to understand and factor that in certain agenda for public discourse. So it becomes important that going forward, we must acquaint ourselves with science communication, with the ability to come up with a few pages of our research output so that journalists and media persons can understand in a way that will help them to report on those pressing issues that we further society. But in conclusion is this: countries, societies, there are power brokers in those societies, there are problems in those societies, and an interplay between the interests of these power brokers and these various problems. And until we are willing to understand those dynamics, we might be looking at a general setting from the peripheral level of what are the problems, what we want to discuss. And finally, it's about not just awareness, not prioritizing, but action. We must look at research that looks at the effects, the aftermath of agenda setting on the actions of audience. During the NSAS protests in Nigeria, we saw how the NSAS, the agenda that was set on the digital space, led to physical mobilization of people, and they went to the streets. So we need more research. For instance, in Nigeria, in the last election, we saw how in the digital space, the agenda was very massive on issue of change, populism, and all that. But at the end of the day, the result from the election did not really speak perfectly with the agenda that we saw online. So we are beckoning on researchers to do that level of research to look at that correlation between the agenda that have been set on the media space and the effect on the actions and solutions on the ground. So I think with this, I'll pause. And then as we have the conversations for the questions I raised, then we can address them. But we must always look at the peculiarity of the African context and continent in discussing issue of agenda setting. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Desmond Okocha. This was really interesting, the areas and the angles which you applied it to Africa and Nigeria. I want to say thank you to all the speakers for all of your presentations. I can't wrap it right now. We have a little time, so we must ensure that our participants say something. I'd like to note that as this seminar is not just going to end here. There's going to be a continuation of this collaboration for a publication to honor the memory of Professor Maxwell Malcolms, and presentations from this conference, if the speakers will so oblige us, will be part of that publication. And also our students and our community of scholars in Ica Nigeria will be making their own contributions. As soon as the publication is ready, we'll get in touch with all of you speakers to review it before we finally send it out to the public as well. I hope that we will get your approval to do that, because we really want to put something on print to immortalize, in a manner of speaking, to keep this memory and the impacts that this remarkable contribution to communications studies and media studies has made on all of us, regardless of where we come from across the world. I want to also read a tribute that was left in the chat here. A tribute to Maxwell Malcolms, a pioneer in mass communication. This is from Adnan Shahid. I don't know if he's still online, but he says, I pay tribute to the remarkable legacy of Maxwell Malcolms, a visionary scholar who revolutionized our understanding of mass communication. His groundbreaking work on agenda setting theory has left an indelible mark on the field. There's more to this, but I would like to go to the last paragraph. It says, throughout his illustrious career, Malcolms demonstrated unwavering dedication to advancing our knowledge of mass communication. His contributions have inspired generations of scholars, researchers, and practitioners. I honor Maxwell Malcolms' remarkable contributions to our field and acknowledge the lasting impact of his work. R.I.P. Thank you for this tribute. We all honor his contributions. That's why we are here. That's why we'll continue to do more to this. So where are the hands? Please let me see your hands if you want to make ask a question, react to the presentations from the speakers, or make your own. Okay, Maureen Chibu. Maureen, please. 30 seconds to 1 minute. Please unmute. I've asked you to unmute. Please unmute. Okay, we'll go to Michael. Michael Folashaye, please unmute and make your contribution. I think Maureen is not able to unmute. I've asked her to unmute.
Thank
Michael,
you.
please.
It has been a wonderful evening to listen to professors and distinguished scholars in the field of communication. Permit me to make this intervention. I would like to ask Professor Chris Fago, you mentioned astroturfing agenda setting. Is that a new name for fake news? I would like to know. Or is there a difference? What's the difference? And for Professor Yousaf, how do you distinguish between psychological agenda setting and sociological agenda setting on the face of it? Thank you.
Yeah, so that's a great question. I think agenda setting has a lot of some really specific end mean goals. So when we talk about fake news, we could be talking about making a site to generate advertising revenue. We could be talking about making a series of social media accounts to manipulate the salience of an issue, right? And so those are very different goals. And I think that fake news is kind of thought of in terms of the content that's being created. But astroturfing is talking specifically about an outcome of generating a bunch of fake news, right? Or a bunch of misinformation, probably would be a better way to put it. And so when you think about it that way, astroturfing is a very specific goal outcome of why someone might, launch a fake news campaign. And I think, made for advertising sites are also an interesting area for studying that folks in communication haven't gotten onto yet. A lot of the open web is fake and is created simply to just generate advertising revenue. And so, people consume that news and, God knows what it says. So that there's like a lot of, there's a lot of worry there about actors, manipulating information, but always there's a goal, right? And so looking at astroturfing is focusing on why they're doing it, not so much the, the operational definition of fake news.
Thank you, Dr. Chris Fago. There's Sam Akwe and Maureen on the 30.
Yeah.
Well,
okay. Thank you very much. I quite commend the contributions that have been made that have enriched my knowledge. But I want Dr. Fago to please explain exactly what you mean by agenda setting as a zero-sum game. And I would also want Dr. Liu to explain whether agenda setting theory is sufficient to explain communication behavior in a postmodern era, bearing in mind what Dr. Okocha said earlier about when the communication theory was propounded, and then looking at it also from the third directions of agenda setting that you laid out here, the densifying setup. Is there going to be a deepening of analysis or study on agenda setting in a postmodern era, given that the theory was propounded during the pre-modern and modern society? And then finally, to Professor Yousaf, you talked about fake news and democratization of the media space, and also in view of flow of information flow between the global north and the south, with regards to the election, American election that just took place. It appears the information flow could not be effectively explained with agenda setting theory, given that the South was terribly shocked at the outcome of the election, because the media, in a way, set the wrong agenda by not providing adequate information on exactly what is going on in America. And can you explain that? Would you say that agenda setting theory would be enough to explain what happened during the American election and the outcome of the election that took place? Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ma. I hope the speakers have noted your question. I'm just looking at the time. I'm wondering if they'll be able to explain everything, but they'll try. Samantha, please ask your question so the answers can all come together. Sam Akpe, please, can you unmute? Okay, all right.
Well, Dr. Comfort Bulus started by saying that 60% of the people get their news from the media. Other speakers have talked about the era where professionals were the ones controlling the news, setting agenda. And we've also heard about the fact that, hey, like in Africa, after independence, politicians moved in and claimed ownership of the media and started controlling the content. I want to ask this question, Professor Yousaf and Dr. Okocha. We are now talking about the digital era, and emphasis is on democratic participant theory. The masses must be given access to the use of the media. Is the agenda setting theory still relevant in the modern era, considering the emergence of the digital era?
All right, so thank you, sir. So those are the questions that I've seen. No other hands are raised. I'll please ask that Dr. Lego starts with responding. I think one of the questions was addressed to her, and she also responds and then gives her closing remarks for as short as I know that it's really late in Shanghai where she is now. So if any of us is going to take an extra 5 minutes, I don't think it should be her, except she wants to. So please respond first, then the other speakers can respond, so that if you wish to leave at exactly 5 p.m., you can leave. Thank you. Dr. Lego, am I getting this pronunciation well? Is it Lei or Lee?
Hey,
Hey.
I'm not sure I heard the question too, but I'll just comment a little bit about the questions surrounding agenda cutting. Seems people are interested in it. I think Chris did a good job explaining what that is, but I'll just offer one more concept. I'm not sure if you have heard about it. Agenda deflating. So when we say agenda setting, we usually about an issue with the more likely that my recent research, I found that certain types of media, like partisan media in the United States, like conservative media, they had the effect of agenda deflating. Meaning the more that you hear them talk about one issue, the less likely that you will think it is important. And this is particularly applied to the case of gun violence. I think it works similar to the mechanism of agenda cutting. I think in certain scenarios, certain media like conservative media in the United States, they want to distract people's attention from a certain topic. Like to them, gun violence, the gun regulation may not be something that they want people to pay attention to. And sometimes they will discuss more about, for example, the mental health of the gun shooters. And they will want to, direct people's attention to a public health issue rather than a gun violence issue. So in that sense, agenda deflating works, meaning that again, different media are competing for public attention, but there are a lot more mechanisms that are happening at the same time as agenda setting. I think agenda cutting, agenda deflating are two examples, and I think more interesting work I think we wanted to see more interesting work looking at those different phenomena.
Thank you for your remarks. Does that pass as closing remarks as well?
Yeah, and again, so thank you so much for the opportunity here. So I think we don't usually get a chance to meet people from different areas of the world, and I really thank the organizer of Nigeria chapter for organizing such an event, and especially including people from not just from this part of the world, but places in the United States, in China, in different parts, so we can talk about issues that we are all interested in, and to memorize, great scholars that we all respect. So thank you so much for the opportunity, and I hope that I get a chance to connect with you in future projects. You have my contact information, so we can communicate offline. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Please send us the presentation so we can share in our community as well. I'm sure some who are not here will be interested in having it, but especially, as I mentioned, we're putting up a publication with the Faculty of Communication, Bingham University, a publication in the memory of Dr. McCombs, and we'll be hoping that we can include these presentations in that publication. Thank you. So we'll go to Dr. Comfort Bulus now. Is there any question that was directed to you? Please answer and as well give your closing remarks before we get to Dr. Vago, Dr. Yousaf, and Dr. Okocha.
I don't think anything was particularly directed at me in reference to questions. I just know that one comment on something I had said. I think in closing, if I may say, there was something I came across when I was just, reading on what exactly is going on with agenda setting, especially the future of agenda setting. And something that struck me was the need for more critical media literacy in challenging what the digital space is bringing to the fore. There's also the need for transparency of platforms, and once again, in maybe other climes, there are probably some levels of legal or laws that kind of guide certain things. But I know that here in Nigeria, there's a need for more transparency in the platforms, just and like it was said, understanding maybe not necessarily how, but why agendas are being set. I think the why question is very important to answer, because I know that in reading and even engaging and writing on agenda setting, it's always been about, how is it being done? What is being done? But the why, I think, is what the digital space brings to the fore. And I'm hoping that we'll begin to see a whole lot more research it's really looking at the dynamics of how agenda setting has evolved and is evolving, because I don't think it's at one point right now. I think it's really changing, and I like what Professor Lego put in, and I'm looking forward to what you're writing about the 3 different layers, because that just shows how dynamic this theory is, and that it's not dying it's not dying anytime soon. It's just changing its form. So as not to say too much, I think I have said. But thank you very much once again for the opportunity.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Dr. Vago, sorry we are taking a few minutes of your time. Sincere apologies, but Dr. Vago.
No, thank you for having us today. And quickly, I think agenda setting is a tool that you can use to study actors. And there are always going to be interesting and new actors to study in media and in the public and in government and in other spaces. So, when you think about agenda setting like that, we're always going to be able to use it to uncover and to understand. And that's why it'll never go away, you know. So that's my vote, but you know, I'm biased. And yeah, thanks for having me. This was fun. This was a great way to I watched the sunrise here in Boulder, and that was a nice way to do it. So thanks for having me.
Thanks for watching the sunrise and being with us. We appreciate your coming, and we look forward to always having you join our community of ICA in Nigeria. Dr. Yousaf, please. I know there were questions directed to both of you and Dr. Okocha, so the floor is to you now.
Thank you so much. Very quickly, I go to the questions. One question was that what is the difference between psychological agenda setting and a psychological agenda setting? Actually, the main difference is the focus. At psychological level of agenda setting, the focus is on individual level. It examines how media influence the thoughts, attitudes, or perceptions of individuals about the importance of issues or the prominence given to the issues. Whereas a sociological level of agenda setting operates at societal or group level, where the focus is how media shapes the collective priorities of the communities, organizations, or even entire societies. So that is the main difference. And then I quickly come on the misinformation and disinformation. You know, during the COVID-19 pandemic, United Nations noted that the pandemic of infodemic is more dangerous than pandemic itself. So the infodemic of misinformation and disinformation, of course, is a challenge, a big challenge for humanity. So it has influence on societies, on organizations, on individuals, and of course on agendas as well. What Dr. Liu was talking, that Dr. Chris and she are working on misinformation and disinformation role on agenda setting. So because, I mean, either the information is a credible information or misinformation or disinformation, it is becoming increasingly difficult to differentiate. So misinformation, disinformation, fake news, conspiracy beliefs, they are shaping our priorities, our agendas, and of course the public agenda as well. So that would be the challenge, of course, to the credibility of information or authenticity of information. And lastly, thank you so much, Dr. Okocha and his team for organizing this very nice webinar. We met incredible minds who contributed to agenda setting, who talked about agenda setting, and we together pay tribute to the pioneers, the founders of agenda setting theory, who helped all of us. I mean, most of us, the scholars who are working on agenda setting across the globe have never met these great minds, but they do influence our lives, our intellectual paths, our intellectual inspiration, and our intellectual journeys. So thank you so much, all of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much to Dr. Yousaf. We really appreciate your interventions and look forward to continue to collaborate with you from ICA Nigeria chapter. Thank you for being with us. Dr. Desmond Okocha.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yes.
Before I wrap up, I want to acknowledge the presence of the Vice Chancellor of Bingham University, who have joined us in this event.
Wow.
So,
please, maybe his remarks will come before your own now. We have to allow him.
Let's listen to our Vice Chancellor.
Mr. Vice Chancellor, please unmute. It's not always we have a Vice Chancellor come to our seminar, so. Sorry, I'm looking for Dr. Okocha, please unmute so that he can give his maybe just say a greeting to all of us before you conclude, and then we shut down. Okay. Or go ahead if he's not able to or willing to.
Okay. Hello, everyone.
Yes, Prof. Hello to you too.
Yeah, so I want to commend the effort of ICA and my Dean of Faculty of Media and Communication Studies for hosting this very important program. He has done the university proud, and so we want to appreciate him for increasing the visibility of Bingham University. I listened to all the debates. I want to commend all the presenters for the very insightful perspective to the issue of agenda setting. I am a professor of environmental science, and but I've learned you have almost made me to be a mass communicator this evening. So thank you very much. I want to appreciate you, and we're looking forward, to having all of you in Bingham one of these days, so we can see physically. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof, for joining us. Thank you so much. So, Dr. Okocha.
Yeah, so thank you very much. So I think in my own conclusion, we want to say that looking at the genesis of agenda setting theory, which was as a result of Maxwell looking at the work of Lippmann and Bernard, that also scholars should stand on that theory and be able to project into the Bingham has done that. Bingham looking at agenda setting theory over the last 1 year since our Vice Chancellor took over the helm of affairs. We have been able to come up with 3 new theories that are trying to either reinforce or remedy some of the flaws of the agenda setting theory. Number 1 is our environmental dynamo theory, which combines Professor Yousaf's postulation of the sociological and psychological dimensions of the agenda setting theory to look at how both variables combine together to determine the impact and the extent to which agenda setting theory can impact. Structured, deliberative, gossip theory, which brings the issue of fake news or the features together to look at how government themselves deliberately try to chart the agenda for society, with Africa in particular. So we are calling on computer scholars to look at this theory within their local environment, how they can be applied to solving salient issues, environmental issues, social justice issues, and what have you, and equally ask ourselves, he has done the best for a generation. He has given us a good foundation. What can we build out of that foundation? We are ready as a university, in collaboration with every other scholar who's interested, to be able to interrogate and navigate a new path, standing on the shoulder of this great giant who has given us this groundbreaking theory that have become the mother of a host of other theories. So with this, we will say, creating a rallying ground for scholars within the Nigerian community. It's just barely, I think it's less than 2-3 years, but have become the most formidable association of computer scholars in Nigeria. And